Hello, Sydney. Hi there. It's been a beautiful day. We're here to try and get a little bit of justice for an Australian citizen who's been in solitary confinement for 2 years, just summary incarceration. It's been described as torture by numerous doctors. The Australian government is having cups of tea and going to luncheon parties, doing nothing about it. And we're very angry because we have to stand up for the rights of our own citizens and human rights for all citizens, and his human rights are our human rights. Julian Assange's freedom is my freedom.
Julian Assange, stand against government corruption, war crimes. Stand up for free speech.
I'm going to start with a bit of poetry from Jennie, Helena. Woe to the Crown in London town. What prisoners have you now? Not Rudolph Hess, not Jacob Spy, not adulterous wives who lie. It's truth that's hung on Julian's tongue. Your crimes he dared to magnify. Woe to the Crown in London town. The Queen, I fear, has no clothes. We see you carve your wicked scar down a publisher's back, no less. No broad arrow should you bestow. His life, his own, his heart, the press. Woe to the Crown in London town. The Marshalsea is no more. He owes no debt, though we shan't forget. You extorted his days and his years. The price he's paid has been mislaid. Repay him. He will take arrears. Woe to the Crown in London town. Your Parliament is a mess. Your leaders buffoons with deep festoons. Your tower is closed, but Belmarsh arose. No Flambard's rope for Assange. He must be freed. His death we oppose. Woe to the Crown in London town. Your tower is no more. No 9-day Queen, no mobster twins, no forks to torture and hang. Let Julian go. Release him now, because truth and justice must win. Woe to the Crown in London town. Your tyranny has no match. You became a joke when you placed his yoke for revealing crimes. He has done the time. You must extend lost freedom's hand. Restore his life to a new sublime. Thank you, Jennie Helena, Professor of American History, promoter of liberty and freedom, anti-war activist, poet, vocalist and songwriter, who says, "My passion for truth pushes my pen to paper." Thank you, Jennie Helena.
Hi everyone, so we are the Sydney Town Hall gatherers, and we gather here every Friday for Julian Assange, an Australian acclaimed journalist, publisher He is the mind behind the establishment of WikiLeaks, an online news agency that provides factual information for researchers and for everyone concerned about what's happening around the world. We want to tell you about Julian Assange. Julian Assange has been imprisoned already for more than 2 years. This is a high security prison, Belmarsh in the UK. Why is Julian Assange, an Australian citizen, in a high security prison in Belmarsh, a prison built for terrorists? Why is he there? Basically because he is a bloody good journalist. That's the reason for it. He is a fantastic Democrat. He is a peace-loving Australian. Those are the reasons why Julian Assange is in prison in the UK. He is there because he provided information to us, to the world at large. He made it available to big media, and this information comes straight from the horse's mouth. It comes from the US, and it relates to war crimes committed by the US in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and also in Guantanamo Bay. And because he made that information available, like any journalist would do, like any editor would do, like any good publisher would do, then he's been singled out by the US, by the UK. Australia has been complicit very quietly, but doing nothing about it. So we say also by Australia, and he is in prison because of that reason. Now this is a very interesting problem, because if he is in Belmarsh for publishing factual information coming from the US, why don't they, the US, why don't they prosecute the editor of the New York Times? Why don't they prosecute the editor of the Washington Post? Why don't they prosecute the editor of German media that also published the same information and 3 days before WikiLeaks did so? Why? Because it's easier to go against an individual, and an individual that has been painted in our mainstream media as someone who is awkward, who is different, who is unusual. The retaliation against Julian Assange for publishing the truth, factual information that has never ever been proven wrong, has been disastrous for his life. He's lost over 15 kilos in Belmarsh prison in the last 2 years. He has breathing problems, he's got lung problems. He has been prevented from seeing his wife, his partner, and his kids for more than a year now. And he is awaiting extradition to the US. In January this year, Magistrate Barreza in London said that Julian Assange should not be extradited to the US because of health reasons, because the prison system in the US is oppressive, because the US prison system in which Julian Assange would be kept, so-called special measures, special procedures, is equivalent to torture. Torture as it has been defined in so many international agreements that Australia has signed. Because of those reasons, and because there is a high risk of Julian Assange committing suicide in the US, if he is sent to the US, Magistrate Barreza has denied his extradition. So what happened? The US, again, in this punitive fashion, in this shameful fashion, has decided to appeal that decision. And at the moment, we are waiting for a decision as to whether or not that appeal will go through. What we expect, what his family has said, is that the appeal will be heard. It will be heard by the High Court in London. Will they go against international law principles which say that you do not prosecute someone for political opinions? Will they do that? Will the UK go against their own rules simply to please the US? How bad does it have to get for us to be a bit more proud as Australians and to say enough is enough. We cannot put up with this anymore. Mr. Morrison, you've got a mate in the US, speak to Biden, ring him up. Say something about this disastrous situation. He's an ally, he should hear you, Mr. Morrison. But of course, Mr. Morrison has other matters in his mind. But people here in Australia are concerned about this. Tony was telling us about 24 courageous federal parliamentarians who are members of the Bring Assange Home group. There's also an international symposium of parliamentarians from over 30 countries that recently had a meeting in Europe about the same issue, to bring Julian Assange home and to release him. Over here we have the Australian Lawyers Association, we have the Journalist Association, we have Doctors for Assange, we have Amnesty International and so many organizations that are telling our government, Council for Civil Liberties, etc., very reputable human rights organizations that are telling our government enough is enough, stand up, let's bring Julian Assange home. And some of the grassroots expressions of this distasteful situation that we have at the moment, of this breach of international law, is being clearly expressed in motions, in local government entities, in also branches of political organizations around the country. And the Maroubra branch of the ALP, for example, passed a motion unanimously saying, this branch will write to federal parliamentarian leader Anthony Albanese and Shadow Attorney General Mark Dreyfus, supporting their statements of January 2021 that the Australian government should encourage the US government to drop their attempt to extradite Julian Assange from the UK to the US to face charges that could result in a sentence of 175 years. The Maroubra branch continues and it says, the Morrison government should be condemned for its silence on the matter. We know that a British court has found that it would be unjust to extradite Mr. Assange, and that the US has commuted Chelsea Manning, the US soldier convicted of leaking information to Mr. Assange. They have actually commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence. Why don't they do the same with Julian Assange and they stop prosecuting him? They stop persecuting Julian Assange. We note wide public support in Australia for now bringing the Assange case to a conclusion. Enough is enough. How much longer are they going to torture Julian Assange? Now, we have another motion like that, and on Fridays we'll read these motions to let you know that we are not alone. You're not alone if you're interested in this matter. We are so many around the world saying to our governments, talk to each other, resolve this shameful, embarrassing situation. And this one says the following, another branch. We ask the Federal Parliamentary Labour Party to strongly oppose the extradition of Australian citizen Julian Assange from the UK to face trial in the United States for alleged offences under American law. Julian Assange was not in the US when these alleged offences or publication of the truth were said to be committed. Julian Assange is not an American citizen. Julian Assange is an Australian acclaimed journalist who has received more than 21 international awards for excellence in journalism, who has been nominated more than 8 times to the Nobel Peace Prize. We should be proud of Julian Assange. I am proud of Julian Assange. I am proud to stand before you today and talk to you about Julian Assange. And I'll be more proud when our government does something about it and brings him back home. Anyway, let's continue with this motion. So he says, Assange is plainly not guilty of espionage, but of exposing the shooting of unarmed Iraqi civilians from a US helicopter gunship. Remember, 2 Reuters journalists were killed, assassinated on that occasion by US Army personnel. Remember, children were killed, assassinated, shot down on that occasion by US Army personnel. That is Julian Assange's crime, exposing war crimes. How could exposing a crime be a crime? I ask you, how could journalism be a crime? Clearly not, and we must not be fooled by this language converting what is good and positive into a crime. It is not. We don't believe these allegations. They should be simply let go. They should be withdrawn. Julian Assange, as an Australian whose only crime is to expose war crimes, deserves the defense of the Australian government from any harsh and vengeful mistreatment in a US penitentiary. We should receive Julian Assange here and acclaim him again and get more information from him about what's happening around the world in our names. We don't want any more wars in our name. We don't want millions of civilians being killed in our names. We want diplomacy at work. We want him back. We want Mr. Morrison to be talking to Mr. Biden. Thank you.
We need governments, but they can be very, very dangerous. And the only way we can keep them accountable is for the people to be aware of what's been going on and to have accurate reporting in the media. And of course, the WikiLeaks media was too accurate for the government's liking, and that's why they want him silenced. This is by Andrew Fowler, an Australian award-winning investigative journalist. The ultimate purpose of Assange's treatment is a warning to others, particularly other journalists. It's the modern-day equivalent of crucifixion, putting heads of enemies on spikes or public hangings. That is the most beautifully metaphorical comment I've seen yet. It is about putting his head on a spike to frighten anyone from exposing the most incredibly stupid policies and the most terribly evil and wrongful crimes that are actually counterproductive for peace and prosperity. So we want you all to support Assange. When it comes to elections, governments that lose their credibility end up getting sacked. This is a credibility issue for our friends in Canberra. Either they want to stand up and retain some credibility by standing up for justice and doing the right thing, or I would wager anybody here that they will go down at the next elections. And that's just a sad fact. John Howard, one of our most popular Prime Ministers in history, terribly popular Prime Minister, after the invasion of Iraq, he went down, his government went down, and he even lost his own seat. So please, folks, tell your friends, stand up for justice for people all over the world.
Good evening, everyone. This is our 75th week for the Julian Assange Sydney Town Hall gathering. This coming Monday, the 3rd of May, is World Press Freedom Day. This day was set up 30 years ago to remind governments to honour their professed commitment to press freedom. Well, one clear way that our Australian government can honour its commitment to world press freedom is to make a statement in favour of freedom for Julian Assange, the Australian journalist, currently held in a UK prison on behalf of the US to protect its war criminals. Successive Australian Prime Ministers have had 10 years of opportunity to stand up for their citizen, but we have seen them uniformly falling silent and in line with the act of persecuting Julian Assange. Our Prime Ministers love to say they act to uphold press freedom, but when it comes to standing up for a true, free press journalist like Julian Assange, their silence reveals clear hypocrisy. But we must keep demanding that our present Prime Minister has a change of heart. If enough of us point out the clear discrepancy between what he says about press freedom and what he's saying about Julian Assange, he will be forced to act to bring Julian home. World Press Freedom Day is an opportunity for all supporters of a free press to point out the persecution and torture of Julian Assange, which has been carried out because of his journalistic activities, exposing war crimes, torture and high-level corruption. Since press freedom directly affects all of us, our world leaders need to hear the deafening roar of free Assange. The 10-year collective persecution and torture of Julian Assange by the US, UK, Sweden and Ecuador, coupled with the willful inaction of Australia, must feature prominently in the statements of Western leaders who wish to be taken seriously on press freedom. Julian Assange is completely innocent and he is entirely ethical. His journalism is clearly in the public interest, and his innovative methods of protecting whistleblowers have since been adopted by many large media organisations. He should be free. He exposed war crimes, torture and high-level corruption, which are all extremely illegal and immoral. These crimes are well documented, yet the criminals responsible for them are free, while Julian is not. We must all make our voices heard in calling for Julian's freedom. The vital job of holding governments to account is currently vacant. This job was being done by Julian Assange until the UK and Ecuador engaged in a plan to have him placed in solitary confinement on behalf of the US. If we had a media functioning on behalf of the people, there would have been a massive public outcry, and this state of affairs would have been quickly resolved with Julian being granted the freedom he most certainly deserves. Instead, the media have revealed their complicity against Julian, and so it is clearly up to us to voice our concerns as loudly and as eloquently as possible. The longer Julian Assange is kept in conditions of torture, the clearer we can see the malevolence that is built into our system. With increasing evidence of lying and covering up, we must conclude that a major feature of our political system is lying and covering up. This tells us we need more light on the powerful. We need to ensure press freedom, and we need Julian Assange released from prison. Too many people go along with the lies of liars, yet it is truth that sets us all free. Speak the truth. We must get Julian Assange out of Belmarsh prison in the UK. He is currently held on remand on behalf of war criminals and corrupt governments. The theme of this year's World Freedom Day is information as a public good. It is interesting that this theme exactly characterises Julian Assange's work. If we wish to honour press freedom on this year's World Press Freedom Day, we must all speak up for the freedom of Julian Assange. So, free Julian Assange!
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 Thank you.
We are going to hold a vigil outside both Channel 7 in Martin Place and the ABC offices in Harris Street, Ultimo, at 7:30 on Monday morning. That's Monday the 3rd, Press Freedom Day, to remind both the commercial media and our own ABC that they're not doing their job. They are not reporting this injustice against one of their own. Without an effective media, without unbiased uninhibited press, our democracy withers and dies. The media is known as the fourth estate, and its job is to make those in power accountable for their actions, to make sure that they do what we want them to do. That's what a democracy is all about. Those in power must respect our wishes. And the fourth estate's job, the media's job, is to report when they deviate off the track. So a weak media, a sick media, leads to a sick democracy. And we have both a weak and sick media in this country and, in fact, around the world, except I will add for WikiLeaks. But the mainstream media is weak and sick, and we are getting a weak and sick democracy. So, folks, it's time to stand up before our media dies, because if our media dies, our democracy dies, and we don't have to look back too far in history to know what happens when the media dies. So please, folks, get the phone out of your pocket, Google Assange petition, and join 600,000 others in demanding that both the International Criminal Court in The Hague and the Australian Federal Parliament in Canberra act now to correct this injustice that's being perpetrated now for almost 11 years. This situation must end. Julian's freedom and the freedom and liberty of journalists worldwide must be restored if we are to have a working democracy. Thank you.
So Julian Assange has been the target of savage government and media smears and judicial abuse for 10 years. And that is because of his innovative journalism, which has exposed high-level corruption and crimes of war on a massive scale. Although completely innocent, Julian is a political prisoner and has been held in solitary confinement 24 hours a day for many months. In fact, 22 hours of solitary confinement for over 15 days is considered torture by the United Nations. And Australia has signed all those international instruments which confirm that Australia knows solitary confinement to that level, to that degree, is considered torture. Julian Assange is held in Belmarsh Prison, which is UK's Guantanamo Bay, guys. It is the same as Guantanamo Bay, but in the UK. And he cannot be, so they have him there so that he can be extradited to the US. And there he will face trumped-up espionage charges for what investigative journalists do routinely, and he will receive up to 175 years imprisonment if extradited. That is impossible for anyone. No one can be in prison for 175 years. What it means is that Julian Assange will be sentenced to capital punishment. In fact, he will die in prison. Australia opposes the death sentence. This is equivalent to a death sentence for Julian Assange. On the 4th of January this year, a UK court denied that extradition. But the UK continues to hold Assange because the US is appealing the decision. Have you heard anything like that in the past here? Have you heard that Australia would do that to anyone? Of course not. You extradite, you extradite or you don't. And if someone wants to appeal, so be it. But you let the person free in the meantime. If there is no charge and a decision not to extradite, the person should be released from jail and be permitted to be with his family whilst the prosecution continues. Julian Assange's health is waning. He is held in a wing of the prison population by prisoners who are testing positive for COVID-19 every day. Due to his psychological torture and medical neglect, he is susceptible to infection, and medical doctors and other health professionals have called for his immediate release. They have told our government about his health needs, and our consulate in the US knows clearly about this, as many thousands of documents have been released through Freedom of Information, confirming the knowledge that Australian government has about Julian Assange's health issues, including his psychological issue, including the fact that he has been hospitalized on 2 occasions due to fears that he might commit suicide. Anyone in his right mind in politics here in Australia would be doing everything necessary to release Julian Assange in those circumstances. I do not want to be thought of as being complicit in the slow killing of Julian Assange. I do not want my government to be complicit in the slow killing of Julian Assange. Mr. Morrison, Ms. Marise Payne, all those who have a say in these matters, we plead with you to speak to the Biden administration and to ensure that Julian Assange is released to his family so that he can gain his health and he can actually defend himself properly against these trumped-up charges. Thank you.
Free! Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange! Inmate! Our mate! Julian Assange! Inmate! Our mate! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange! Free! Free! Julian Assange!
Georgia Oral! Jennie! Thumbs up for Georgia Oral! Hey! Thumbs up for Georgia Oral! Hey! It's a real prankster.
Yeah, the last one. I'm not
I am a supporter. I go.
Yeah, would you like to take one of their pamphlets?
Take one. Yes. Free Julian Assange. I think that Julian Assange has been treated appallingly by Australia, by Sweden, by England, and potentially by the USA. And I think he should be freed from Belmarsh prison in Britain immediately.
Free Julian Assange.
Thank you.
Julian Assange.
Here. Can I get a positive? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Cheers.
You want to say free Julian Assange on camera?
Yeah, sure. Free Julian Assange. Get that motherfucker out.
This lady might want to say something.
Would you like to say something on YouTube?
Certainly think free Julian Assange, that's all. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Free Julian Assange.
Thank you.
This is the Julian Assange 75th gathering. This is apparently a Paul Kelly concert tonight, which is why there's been so much chaos. I didn't know what exactly it was. No doubt it's the first concert that has happened for a lot of the people attending tonight, so they all seem in a rather festive mood. I think it's been good for us because we've given out a lot of leaflets tonight. We're here Friday night, 4 till 6 approximately, over the winter months, and we're now into winter.
Thank you. Would you like to say free Julian Assange?
Sorry? Oh, definitely free Julian Assange. It's an absolute atrocity that for a decade people have just conveniently chosen to forget, essentially because we're encouraged to dilute any fact and instead of, I don't know, being proud and embracing these people who need to stand up and tell us how things are, we're buying the bullshit. So please free Julian Assange because yes, it is he who represents the value of truth. And it's diabolical that he's been locked up for 10 years. And I don't know how him and his family are coping. And I don't know why everyone can sleep at night and not actually promote the fact that this is just diabolical. Yeah, and yes, the man or the person who's in charge of this country, whose name we will not mention, he needs to take a good hard look at himself. Just quietly. But that's all right. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you all. 75 weeks, you guys are amazing.
We are all Assange.